This is the transcript of the worst 911 call I've ever taken by horror mode. My name is Michael, and I'm a 911 operator. The following transcript is the most terrifying call I ever had.
911, what is your emergency?
Hello?
Yes, what's your emergency, ma'am?
Well, I don't know actually.
Ma'am, do you not have an emergency? Are you sure everything is okay?
Well, like I said, I'm not really sure. I think I'm just being silly. It's probably all in my head.
Okay, ma'am, would you tell me what's going on?
I keep hearing something upstairs. I think someone's in my house, but I'm not sure. Sorry, I know this isn't something to call you guys over, but I'm just too afraid to check it out myself.
Okay, we'll send over some... Ma'am? Hello? The police are on their way, ma'am.
I had no clue what was going on in that house. All I could hear was the deafening screams and cries of the woman. She had given me her address before that happened. A few weeks later, while sleeping in my bed one night, my home phone rang. I tiredly shuffled towards my bedroom counter and picked the phone up. As soon as I picked it up, I heard my own voice.
911, what is your emergency?
I was confused. I hadn't called 911. But even so, why was I hearing my own voice? Then it continued.
Hello?
Yes, what's your emergency, ma'am?
Well, I don't know actually.
And so on. Someone was replaying the audio from my 911 call with that woman. Every night since then has been like this. My phone would ring around 1 or 2 in the morning, and it would be a reply of my call with that woman, the most haunting call of my career. It pains my heart every day, and sometimes when I'm getting up from bed in the middle of the night to answer yet another haunting and torturous phone call, I look out my bedroom window, and I swear I notice a slight movement by the bushes in my yard. I know it's not the wind. When the police arrived at her home that night, they found her body in the living room and her phone on the floor. The murderer was never caught. He was never caught despite the tip I left the detectives, the thing that happened at the end of my 911 call with the woman.
911, what is your emergency?
Hello?
Yes, what's your emergency, ma'am?
Well, I don't know actually.
Ma'am, do you not have an emergency? Are you sure everything is okay?
Well, like I said, I'm not really sure. I think I'm just being silly. It's probably all in my head.
Okay, ma'am, would you tell me what's going on?
I keep hearing something upstairs. I think someone's in my house, but I'm not sure. Sorry, I know this isn't something to call you guys over, but I'm just too afraid to check it out myself.
Okay, we'll send over some...
There was a brief pause, a moment of silence after the woman's cries ceased, and that's when I heard heavy footsteps approach the phone.
Ma'am? Hello? Are you still there?
He breathed heavily into the phone.
Michael,
A voice whispered.
how did I do, Michael? Did her screams excite you as much as they did me?
I was confused. Who was this person, and how did they know my name?
Who is this?
I demanded to know. I could hear the police sirens in the background through the phone before the mysterious man finally replied.
I'm going to make sure you never forget this night, Michael. Never forget this night.
Things were screwed from the beginning. A woman named Carol dials 911 and claims that somebody's inside her house. We go investigate, searching the place inch by inch, but find nothing. Usually, this could be easily explained away. The mind of an older person living alone eventually starts deteriorating. The onset of dementia and other mental issues start to take a toll on their lives. Quite sad, really. However, this woman is only 24. In other words, the probability of all this being inside her head is extremely unlikely. She also seemed to be terribly distraught by this whole situation. Why would she be acting? We leave her place and tell her to contact us if she sees anything again. I mean, we couldn't really do anything at that point. We were somewhat surprised when we got another call from her the very next day. We drive down there and search the house again. We find nothing again. Problem is, the house seems different this time. Almost as if there was some subtle detail that made it a separate place from the one we were in yesterday. My partner, Beck, says that he noticed it as well, but didn't quite understand what's wrong. We decide not to say anything about this, as we tell Carol that we came up with nothing. However, she tells us to stay.
I recorded him,
she says. She takes out her phone and tells us to watch the video she's pulled up. It was footage of her in the house. She's running around, breathing frantic. And then we see him. A large figure, covered head to toe in what appears to be a black bodysuit. He lumbers towards the camera as Carol screams and ducks into a room, locking it from the inside. There are a few bangs on the door before we can hear footsteps walking away. We don't know how to react to this footage, but we try anyways. We come to the conclusion that the man must have left once Carol got behind the door. However, the front door was locked when we came, and Carol told us that she hadn't left the room. Did he also have keys to the house? That would explain a lot, but it also made the situation a lot worse. We decide to keep an eye on her house for the night. We're discreet, parking about a block down the road in an unmarked car. We're both fully awake, ready to go as soon as we see some sketchy crap. At around 2 a.m., we see somebody walking across the road towards her house. However, it isn't the man. It's Carol herself. Beck and I must have had the same look on our faces. What the hell? We get out of the car and make our way over there, knocking hard on the front door. However, nobody answers. We can see lights flickering on and off intermittently, but we're not sure what that's supposed to mean. Was she trying to tell us to leave? We get a call from dispatch a few moments later. They're telling us that Carol has called 911 again, saying that there are now multiple people inside her house. They ask if we need backup. We say yes. Without another moment of hesitation, we force the door open and barge in. The living room lights still flicker on and off, but we see the light switch and nobody is touching it. We call out for Carol, but nobody responds. In fact, the place is dead quiet. I can see the neighboring houses starting to turn on their lights from the commotion. We rush up the stairs and start sweeping each room. But there's nothing. Once again, we search the place inch by inch, but nothing is in here. Not even Carol, who we clearly saw enter a few moments earlier. As I pace around in petrified confusion, Beck speaks up. "There's rooms here that shouldn't be." "What the hell are you talking about?" I ask in response. "I've been counting," he says. "There were 9 total the last time we came. There are 10 now. You didn't notice it?" I force myself to think hard. Subconsciously, I knew that something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. However, I eventually realize. The basement. There was only one door down there the last time. Beck nods. 2 now. I don't know what to think. I look at my surroundings and try to make an assessment, but there's really none that can be made. We hear a knock on the door about 10 seconds later. It sounds agitated. We look out the living room windows, but aren't met with the red and blue police lights. We're hesitant to answer, of course. I decide to take a step forwards, but Beck pulls me back. He looks at me and shakes his head, whispering, "We left the door open, remember?" He was right. My radio starts crackling. Another call from dispatch. They're telling us that we need to leave the house immediately, that Carol called again, saying we were going to die in a deathly monotone voice. The knocking has stopped, but we can hear footsteps in the basement. Something is in here, with us. We've decided that this was enough. We needed to get the heck out of here. As we start descending the steps, we hear a voice coming from the kitchen. Carol comes out, blocking our path to the door. She looks detached, with blank, beady eyes staring right at us.
"Did you find him?"
she asks, without a semblance of emotion in her voice.
"I think he might be in the basement. Why don't you go check?"
Beck and I are frozen in shock. She just keeps looking at us, gesturing towards the basement door every now and then. The footsteps down there sound like they're running in circles now. We ignore her request, abruptly brushing past her and bolting out of the front door. The backup still isn't here, so we decide to just get into our car. However, we see somebody down the street peering through our driver's side window. He's large, dressed in what appears to be a black, full-body suit. He looks away from the window and directly at us. It's hard to tell from this far, but the suit doesn't seem to have any eye holes. Beck speaks up. "Sir, please step back from the vehicle." His voice cracks in the middle of the sentence. He's terrified. As soon as Beck stops talking, the figure starts running towards us. It's fast. Too fast. In the time that it takes for us to pull up our guns, we've realized that it's actually moved past us, into the house. We waste no more time, running into the car, locking the doors, and waiting until backup arrives. When it finally does, we're extensively questioned, while what appears to be a SWAT team searches the house. However, it isn't the police chief asking us. Instead, it's some guy in a suit that we've never seen before. He asks us things like, how many doors were there in the house? And what did Carol look like exactly? And did we ever see a man with one eye wandering around? We answer inconclusively to pretty much all of them. We have no idea what the hell's going on. At one point, we see SWAT members carrying multiple stretchers outside and loading them into their truck. Not an ambulance, mind you, but their own truck. Eventually, the man who was questioning us tells us to go home and to report to our station as usual. He tells us not to worry about what we've seen here. I don't know how he expects us to do that. We drive back to the station in complete silence. As we park, Beck finally lets out a sigh. Jack is freaking crazy, dude. I look at him in confusion. What are you talking about? Who the hell is Jack? He reciprocates an equally confused stare at me. What the hell are you talking about? The dude who owns the house. What? It was a lady named Carol. How'd you forget already? We hold each other's chaotic gaze for what feels like a minute, but we say nothing further. We both silently exit the vehicle and start heading our separate ways home. We both know that something's terribly wrong with the other. I try not to think about it too much as my head hits the pillow. I manage to drift off to sleep about 3 hours later, only to be woken up immediately by the telephone. Barely coherent, I answer it.
We need you. A woman dialed 911. Says that somebody's in her house.
My heart sinks slightly. It sinks completely when he tells me the address. It's Carol's. I hang up the phone and slump into the bed. I just want this nightmare to end. I'm a cop, and I got dispatched to a missing child report. Part 1 by Boggles 52. In case you don't know, I'm a rookie cop in a small rural Pennsylvania town currently stuck working the night shift. I work your normal patrol shift, driving around, pulling traffic, responding to your usual domestic disputes, and whatever other wonderful calls dispatch sends my way. I responded to some bizarre calls the other week, and right as I thought life was returning to normal, I now find myself in the eye of yet another unsettling investigation.
Dispatch to 1034. 1034, go ahead. We just got a call from a woman who said she came back home from work and can't find her daughter anywhere. She was very distraught, and the call taker was not able to obtain much additional information. Can you please respond to this address for a potential missing child report?
Dispatch provided me the address, and I started towards the house. I didn't activate my lights and siren, because 9 times out of 10, these missing children end up being rebellious teenagers who don't feel like coming straight home after school. I approached the old farmhouse and noticed the beautiful flowers planted out front. It reminded me of my Aunt Maggie's house. I exited the cruiser, and before I even approached the front porch, a woman came running outside hysterically.
"Officer, please help. We can't find our daughter. Oh God, oh God, oh God. My husband was supposed to be watching her today since he was off from work, and when I got home she wasn't here."
Her words poured out faster from her mouth than they could pour into my ears. "Ma'am, I understand you're very upset, but I need you to slow down so I can listen to everything you are saying. I'm Officer Barkley, but please feel free to call me Sarah." As I held up my hands to motion her to slow down, a man walked out of the house. "Officer, I'm David Fitz, the father." David reached his hand out towards me. He was visibly shaking, but spoke much more clearly than his wife. He added, "My wife here is Catherine. Our daughter is missing. I was with her all day today, and I must have fallen asleep on the couch. How stupid of me." David's glance dropped to the ground and he shook his head. "I don't know how I fell asleep, but whenever Catherine came home, it woke me up, and we can't find Emma anywhere." David walked 3 steps to his left and put his arms around his wife to console her. I reached into my vest pocket and got out my notepad. "Okay, I'm going to help you find your daughter. I just need to ask you a few standard questions before I can go out looking for her, though, all right?" David shook his head in agreement. I asked, "How old is Emma?" 6. "What does she look like?" "She has long brown hair, green eyes, and she was wearing yellow overalls today because we were outside planting." I wrote down everything he was saying. I asked, "When exactly was the last time you saw her, and where?" Let's see. I had turned on the evening news, and she sat on the couch with me. That was at 5. "Does Emma have any illness that would be cause for concern, including mental?" This time Catherine spoke. "No, she is a perfect little child. There's nothing wrong with her, and she just wouldn't go off wandering by herself. She's smart for her age." In the academy, we're taught one of the first steps in handling a missing child case is to check the entire house first. Very often, small children like to hide in the house as a game. I have several additional questions to ask you both, but would you mind if I first took a look around your house? David and Catherine let me into their home, and I worked my way from the top to the bottom. I started with the attic. Nothing. I checked every single bedroom and took my time in Emma's room to look for any clues as to where she might have gone. I naturally sensed that she left of her own accord, because this is such a small town. We don't deal with kidnappings, aside from custody battles, that is. I finished my thorough search of the home with absolutely no luck. I went back outside to ask David and Catherine additional questions, since it appeared this was becoming a real missing child case. "Do you have a photograph of your daughter?" Catherine began running into the house. "Yes, I will be right back." After approximately 30 seconds, Catherine came back outside with a photograph of Emma. It was a newspaper clipping of her. I was expecting a normal photograph, but I asked, "Oh, I see she was in the newspaper. What for?" As a cop, I'm naturally curious. "Oh, this paper is from a few months ago. You said your name was Sarah, right?" Catherine didn't get to finish explaining why Emma was in the newspaper before a switch turned on in her head and she was redirected. "Yes, ma'am." "Sarah, do you have any children?" "No, ma'am." All right then. I won't expect you to understand what we are going through then, but I need you to get every single officer out there looking for our baby." I understood Catherine's concern, so I radioed to dispatch the description of Emma and a summary of what happened. I had every officer circulate the area to look for her, and I requested that Sergeant Oakley arrive to our scene. Sergeant Oakley arrived and took me off to the side. "All right, Berkeley. You seem to have most of the information right now. I'm going to finish up the paperwork here and the questioning. I need you to start canvassing the area and talk to any nearby neighbors in case they saw this little girl in the past few hours." I got into my cruiser and started back towards the road. I saw a house not too far up the right, so I started in that direction. I pulled up to a red brick home and knocked on the door. An older woman opened the door.
"Hello, officer. What seems to be the problem? I hear a lot of commotion outside."
The woman peeked around the side of me, looking towards the police cruisers up the road. "There was a little girl who went missing, Emma Fitz." The woman slightly turned her head to the side and appeared a little confused. After about 3 seconds, she responded,
Well, yes. Does this mean you found her?
Now I was confused. No, ma'am. I'm here because we are still looking for her. Have you seen her?
No, officer. But may I ask, why have you now begun looking for Emma again, nearly 10 years after she was missing?
I'm a cop, and I got dispatched to a missing child report. Part 2, by Boggles 52. Was this woman crazy? Or what if she was right, and David and Catherine Fitz were having a psychotic breakdown? I have certainly seen people have mental breakdowns and relive their past, but I have never seen two people at the exact same time have the same mental breakdown. Something didn't add up. I remember that I still had the photograph Catherine gave me in my pocket. I reached into my pocket and took out the photograph. Ma'am, is this a photograph of Emma Fitz that you said went missing 10 years ago? The woman grabbed her reading glasses off of her head and set them on her nose. She reached over and slowly took the newspaper clipping out of my hand. After studying the photograph for nearly 10 seconds, she responded,
No, this isn't the girl. I remember, because Emma had blonde curly hair like Shirley Temple. Every time I saw her, I would call her Shirley, and she would get so mad and yell at me, saying, My name isn't Shirley, it's Emma.
The woman quietly laughed as she relived the memory. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't even get your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, officer. Yes, I'm Judith.
I still was deciding whether or not I believed everything that Judith was telling me, but I had to investigate her knowledge further. What happened to Emma Fitz's parents after she went missing? Are they the same people who currently live there? Judith shook her head, and her expression grew serious again.
No, they moved out about a year after Emma went missing. They were so depressed that they just grew apart. They blamed each other for Emma's disappearance. Such a shame. Even after they moved, though, the house sat there for nearly 3 years. Everyone around here knew what happened and didn't want to move into that house because there were rumors about Emma's disappearance somehow being related to that house.
Judith threw her hands in the air.
Oh, but you know how weird these small-town people can get. They think everything is haunted around here.
What do you know about the new people that moved into the house? Was their last name also Fitz?
It's been over 6 years since that couple moved in, and I never got to meet them. Right after they moved in, I tried to take brownies over to them, but they weren't home, so I left the brownies on their front porch with a note. They never said thank you or stopped by, so I didn't bother going out of my way to speak to them. The most I see of them is when they drive by my house and turn down their lane. I did find it odd that they never took the Fitz name off the mailbox, but whatever.
I thanked Judith for her time and let her know that I would possibly be stopping back over tomorrow. So, is it just a sheer coincidence that David and Catherine have the same last name as the previous owners and have a daughter with the same name as their daughter? That's not possible. There's no way that is just a coincidence. There is something else going on here, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of it. I eventually headed back to the station for an impromptu shift meeting. I was one of the first to arrive back at the station, and I saw my good friend, Tim, there. Tim came up to me and asked, "Some weird stuff, right?" I hadn't told anyone the information I got from Judith yet. I wasn't sure what exactly Tim was referring to, so I asked, "What exactly do you mean?" Tim looked surprised again. Come on, kid. You lived here back then. Even if you weren't a cop, I'm sure you remember hearing about how Emma Fitz went missing from that house like 10 years ago. No, I honestly don't remember that. But you know how my dad always tried to keep me sheltered from what was going on in this town, because he didn't want me worried about what he did at work every day. I'm so confused, Tim. If that girl went missing 10 years ago, then what the hell happened today? Who are David and Catherine? Before Tim could answer me, Sergeant Oakley walked in along with the last 2 officers who were waiting on. Sergeant Oakley announced, "All right, everyone. I called this shift meeting to talk about what's going on with this Emma Fitz case. There's going to be a lot of media on this one, and there's a lot of weird confusion that's with this case. For those of you that weren't around 10 years ago," Sergeant Oakley paused and looked right at me. It's always nice to be reminded I'm a rookie in the room. Sergeant Oakley continued, "There was a little girl named Emma Fitz who went missing from that same house. We never could find her. Then today, we find out another girl named Emma Fitz went missing from that same house. I know how screwed up this sounds, which is why we're here, so I can explain to everyone the conversation I had with Mr. David Fitz and Mrs. Catherine Fitz. They aren't from this area, so when they moved here 6 years ago for David's job, they were tight on money and couldn't afford much for a house. But since Catherine was pregnant at the time, they needed a home that could comfortably accommodate their baby. They found that house for almost half of what market value was. As they soon found out, the reason that house was so cheap was because there was one huge contingency that the sellers required for the buyers to do. They required whoever bought their home to change their last name to Fitz. They wanted all official documents, white pages, everything related to that address to have the name Fitz on it, in case their daughter Emma ever tried to find her way back home. David and Catherine thought it over, but ultimately they decided to take the offer and changed their last name. The previous owners left their new addresses and phone numbers for David and Catherine, and David told me that they still regularly get phone calls from them to make sure no one new has moved into that house. Everyone around Amber Forest has their opinions on that house, but since they weren't from the area, they didn't view the house negatively just because a girl was kidnapped from it, and I can't blame them. I think it's stupid how paranoid people get about some of the house's histories around here, but I digress. Sergeant Oakley took a big sip of his hot coffee. I asked, "So, why the hell did they name their daughter Emma? That's just creepy." Sergeant Oakley responded, "Yeah, I agree, Barkley. I asked the same darn thing. They said they had no idea the prior tenant's daughter was named Emma. They just knew that there was a little girl that went missing. Catherine was very upset when I told her that the little girl's name was also Emma Fitz. She started shaking and said that she didn't know what made her choose that name. Her husband chimed in and told me that they remembered exactly how Catherine chose the name Emma. One night while Catherine was pregnant, she dreamt about walking down the hallway into their nursery and saw the name Emma written on the wall. I guess she's into that mumbo-jumbo on signs or whatever, so she decided the dream was a sign to name their daughter Emma." My next question was one that everyone in the room was thinking. What the hell do we do from here? We're going to need to talk to the original Fitzes and reopen the original missing Emma Fitz case.
I'm a cop, and I got dispatched to a missing child report. Part 3 by Barkles 52.
Hello, I'm Officer Barkley. Thank you so much for taking the time to drive up here and talk with us. The male reached out his hand. I'm Roger Fitz. This is my wife. Well, my former wife, Lisa. You mentioned on the phone that you needed to speak with us about our daughter's disappearance. Have you found... Roger could barely finish his sentence without choking on his own words. Have you found the body? No. I'm sorry to say that we don't have any developments relating to your daughter's disappearance. We actually have another disappearance of a young girl, 6 years old, and we think these two cases could potentially be related. Lisa looked confused.
Well, what makes you think they're related? I'm sure there have been other children that have gone missing over these years as well.
I took a deep exhale as I prepared to explain the eerie similarities to the Fitzes. Roger and Lisa were genuinely shocked, not only to hear about the latest disappearance, but also to find out that she was also named Emma. I continued. So, given these similarities, that's why we have asked you both to come speak with us. Do you have any ideas or inclinations as to what could have happened to both your daughter and the other Emma Fitz? Lisa repeatedly shook her head. She slowly muttered, "This damn house. I told you, it's a damn house." Roger consoled Lisa. Roger saw that I was intrigued by Lisa's comment, and he added, Lisa is not fond of that house. She always thought that house had to do with Emma's disappearance. I wasn't sure exactly where he was going with this, so I asked, "What do you mean when you say the house had something to do with the disappearance?" "Oh, I'm not saying I believe it, but Lisa here has always been adamant that house was, haunted, I guess. She had dreams about Emma disappearing several nights prior to her disappearance." I stopped taking notes and focused on actively listening. "How do you think the house contributed to her disappearance?" I asked Roger my question, although it was actually directed at Lisa. To my surprise, Lisa answered, "This house is pure evil." Lisa intently stared at me as she responded. I left the interview room and went back out to our break room to find Sergeant Oakley gulping down a cup of coffee. "Hey, Sarge, you're not going to believe the original Fitz's theory on what's happening to their daughter. They think the house is haunted." Cripes, not another crazy couple. This town is filled with crazies who believe in that junk. Maybe I'm the crazy one for thinking they would be more helpful with this search. I know you searched the house earlier, but I want to go back over there with more men and do an intense search. It was hard not to take Sergeant Oakley's request as an insult to my ability to search a home, but given the intensity of this case, I understood his decision. I offered to be one of the officers who went back to the house, and Oakley was happy to hear my willingness. Tim, Peterson, and I all went back to the house. We searched in the attic, which was practically empty. We then worked our way down to the second floor and made our way through each room. We checked closets, dressers, underbeds, absolutely everywhere. We had no luck finding Emma. We continued onto the main floor and checked all of the kitchen pantry cupboards, closets, even the basket of blankets sitting next to the couch. Lastly, we worked our way down into the basement. It was a small basement that consisted of one main unfinished room with a toilet in the corner. It was common to have toilets in these old homes because back when this was a coal mining town, the men would enter the house through the basement and use the toilet and shower before heading upstairs into the main home. I heard Tim quietly grumble, "What the hell?" And then he followed up with a louder, "Guys, come check this out." Peterson and I headed over to where Tim was standing, just under the stairwell. Tim was shining his flashlight against a small cubbyhole door. The door did not have a handle on it. It only had a plain silver faceplate with no keyhole and no mechanism on it. I leaned in close to look into the crack between the cubby door and the frame and saw there was a deadbolt securing the door shut. "What the hell is right?" I said. "This cubby can only be locked from the inside." Peterson ran out to his cruiser to grab the breaching kit that he was assigned. The breaching kit included any and all tools we would need to open a door. He returned about 30 seconds later, and we shoved a crowbar-like tool into the cubbyhole. After Tim made a few attempts, he finally got the door open. We found a girl lying on the floor, holding on tightly to a stuffed bear. She wasn't responding when I asked her if she was all right. I crawled into the cubby space and dragged her out. She was wearing yellow overalls. I placed my pointer and middle fingers onto her neck and felt for a pulse. It was weak, but she had a pulse. I immediately called for medics and repeatedly attempted to get a response from her. She slowly opened her eyes, but was unable to speak. It had been nearly 24 hours since she was missing. Medics arrived on the scene, and I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. Tim and Peterson remained on the scene to gather evidence to determine if any foul play was involved. Sergeant Oakley met me at the hospital. He came up to me outside of Emma's room where she was being treated. He advised me, "I spoke with the guys, and it sounds like Emma locked herself into that cubby. There's no way anyone else locked her in there, and there was nothing inside that cubby that appeared upset. This was yet again the typical outcome of a child hiding in her own home, but for some reason, she must not have been able to get the lock back open." I replied, "Wow, that must have been so terrifying for her. Are you sure the parents had nothing to do with it? Why didn't they hear her scream? Why did her mom hand me that newspaper photograph instead of the real one?" Sergeant Oakley shrugged his shoulders. "Those old houses are built pretty solid. Maybe they couldn't hear her scream from all the way upstairs, especially if they had an AC unit running or other appliance. I agree it was weird she chose to give you a newspaper clipping, but that isn't a crime. These young millennials nowadays don't even keep printed photographs around the house anymore. Sure, they take pictures when they have babies and keep them in frames, but after that all they do is post them to social media. Maybe that was the most recent photograph she had." While still suspicious, everything Sergeant Oakley theorized was plausible. I waited at the hospital until Emma's parents came to see her. They went running into her room and cried while grasping their daughter. I let them become reacquainted with their daughter before asking Emma any questions. I waited until her parents were there because it is not advised to question a minor without their parents present. I introduced myself. "Hi, Emma. I'm Sarah, and I'm a police officer. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Emma smiled and said, "Sure." "You gave your parents quite a scare with hiding in that cubbyhole. Why did you go down there?"
I was playing hide and seek, but I couldn't open the door after I closed it. Then I fell asleep."
"And why did you go down into that cubbyhole?"
Emma wanted to go in there.
Catherine corrected Emma.
"Emma, remember what we talked about before? Try not to refer to yourself as Emma. Just say I or me when you're talking about yourself, sweetie."
Emma responded,
"I know, Mom. I'm talking about the other little girl with the same name as me."
I quietly made my exit and headed back to the station. I told Sergeant Oakley that he was right. Emma was just a kid who found a place to hide and accidentally got herself locked in the cubbyhole, and he could tell Roger and Lisa that they were free to go back home.